Hey guys, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. All right, welcome back. Femi Oladehin, Senior Partner at Gentile Capital Management, joins me now. Hello, Femi. Good to see you always. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Nancy. Absolute pleasure as usual.
Yes, welcome. I don't know if you listened to Dr. Ladi Balakefi, the Acting Director, Monetary Policy Department of the CBN. Did you listen?
Yes.
What,
Yes, I did.
what do you think of the explanations and even the explanations by the governor yesterday? Like I mentioned, I asked him that question on inflation because that's what's biting everyone now. What do you think with those explanations, and why is it difficult for us to understand that explanation? In fact, I got a message. Someone, of course, my team sent it to me while on here. In fact, there was a message saying they are blowing grammar on inflation. Some actually asked, this will not put food on the table. Some are asking, why has the government not refined fuel domestically? That is not the role of the central bank to refine fuel anyway. But many Nigerians seem not to even understand what the CBN is doing, or perhaps even if they understand, why their decisions are not taking effect as urgently as possible.
Hey, Nancy, thank you for having me on the show. Look, I listened to the CBN governor yesterday, and I also listened to Haji on the call this morning. And what is obviously clear right now is that the economy has been overheating for quite some time, and the effects of that overheating of the economy are becoming very apparent to the average Nigerian. And as you alluded to during your conversation earlier, 800 basis points of increase in 6 months, effectively since February. And we're still seeing inflation riding higher. I mean, crossed 34%. So as we know, these are historical highs, whichever way you look at it. And the implication of that is the average Nigerian is feeling that in their pockets. They're feeling it on their tables when they want to eat, and they're feeling it everywhere they're going. And it's obvious that the central bank is focused on using its normal tools. Unfortunately, it's limited in what it's able to do. I think I had an interview on Monday and had called that they were going to do a 50 basis point increase, simply because even on the interest rate front, they're getting to the peak of their ability to increase rates, increasingly. And I expect that the next MPC is probably going to be the last one we're going to see an increase in rates. What is obvious now is that this is no longer a monetary policy problem. This is a fiscal policy problem. And until the fiscal side of the government actually realize that their contributions to this problem is even worse, then honestly, we're just kidding ourselves. They just passed a 6 trillion naira supplementary budget. I mean, what are we doing here? Are we joking? Seriously.
It's like she mentioned, doctor mentioned earlier, that's the acting director, that they can only act within what's within their role and their purview. They can't provide security. Our view, one of our viewers that asked the question, she's blowing grammar. Let the government begin to refine fuel. CBN cannot. It's not CBN's duty to refine fuel. So how much laxity really, how lax has the fiscal policy been in terms of addressing the problem? Because we're seeing food inflation. Central Bank of Nigeria cannot produce food, for example. But their actions also can, do have an impact on growth, do have an impact on borrowing costs, do have an impact on even equities markets, do have an impact on, markets generally, do have an impact on even Nigerians, So how do we really balance all of this out?
Look, I mean, Nancy, it's a conundrum we've been talking about for the past 6 months, right? We all knew that when the central bank governor came in, they were inheriting probably the worst monetary policy environment ever in the history of the country. And that in itself was a major problem for them. And in addition to that, from the fiscal side, the government unfortunately had to spend aggressively to justify the elections that they had just won. So you had what I would probably describe as caught between the devil and the blue sea. And unfortunately, the tools that government has, the tools that are available to government in this kind of instances are limited, especially even to the central bank. The central bank can only move when it comes to monetary policy, and there are very specific tools that it can use. On the other tools that are available to it, that's the CRR, the liquidity ratios and all of that, it's maxed out. There's nothing they can do, any attempt to do anything else, you start to see banks go into distress. So obviously the only option that they have is interest rates. And what we've been explaining since the beginning of this year is that the drivers for inflation in Nigeria today are multifold. Yes, there is the fact that there's a liquidity overhang that came from the Buhari government. But in addition to that, there are structural deficiencies in the market that are driving these inflation numbers. And until those structural deficiencies are fixed, you are always going to be in the same cycle of high inflation without any form of deceleration. You know, the CBN official said earlier on that she expects inflation to be at 27% in December. I would say exactly what I said yesterday on another TV channel, and I would eat my shirt out if that happens.
I'm telling you, which I
Because,
also told,
again,
I will do a party here if it gets to 27%.
I would eat my shirts out if that happens. Because the reality is that the drivers of that inflation number are fundamental issues that cannot be fixed in a short while. And unfortunately, even the moves that are being made on the fiscal side don't lend themselves to both medium-term and long-term remediation of the fiscal issues. And that is where the problem is. Look, I'm an economist, and I would have been excited if I felt that some of the policies that have been implemented now, 12 months down the line, 18 months down the line, will fix those fundamental problems. But there is none that I can point to, or there are not a lot that we can point to that are targeted at those structural issues. And until we fix those structural issues, we're going to have the same problems. Imported inflation is a big issue. Growth has stagnated, badly. You have the exchange rate still continuing to struggle. So you would wonder how the central bank is patting itself on the back when the policies, the indices that we use to measure the effectiveness of its policies are all showing worse numbers than they were in February.
Exactly. That was what I was struggling with also during the interview with her, but she sounded so optimistic. So I was like, okay, Nancy, let me also hold my fire, because mine is to ask, penetrating questions. Perhaps they're seeing things that we are not seeing on the outside, and the kind of conversations that go on amongst them that are, economic handlers. But you also said something which she also mentioned, which is also in public domain. The federal government is going all out for the next 150 days in terms of tariffs, on a few food commodities. How do you think that will impact food inflation? That's one. If food, especially the component of food, the component of imported inflation for food, how will it impact that? Then secondly, Governor Cardoso also mentioned yesterday, and let me read from the communique, let me quote him. He said the MPC noted the narrowing spread between the various foreign exchange segments of the market, indicating price discovery and improved market efficiency, thus reducing opportunities for arbitrage and speculation. What would you say about the narrowing FX spread? Have we really achieved price discovery, and how do you think that can actually also sink into the imported inflation which we have, and as well as even the core inflation side, which is all other items except food? Femi, I know you understand my question. I'm not an economist, but for those of you, I'm trying to probe all the issues and see. Yes.
Yes. And so let's start with your first question, which is on core inflation and how the way they're seeing core inflation and the way the market is seeing core inflation and what the differences are here. The reality here is this: the Nigerian economy has been structured in a way where inefficiencies form a significant portion of our costs. And those inefficiencies feed into baseline inflation on a regular basis. Think about it. You go to the farms, the transport costs between the farms and on the underlying market means that there's a lot of inefficiencies and pricing to that. Also, the fact that we actually don't have a good storage environment, again, that feeds into that. Now, to talk then about the government's tariff interventions, look, I've had a lot of interesting conversations with colleagues in the finance space around this. I felt that, look, in the short term, imported inflation was a problem. And the fact that our food production numbers have been constrained dramatically meant that we needed to find short-term solutions. If people cannot feed, then you can't control them. The government is going to lose its control over the people if they cannot eat. And so you have to feed them. So I have no problems whatsoever with the targeted 150 days, 180 days importation of food so that we can feed Nigerians and hopefully right this problem. However, the second part of your question is actually fundamental to how we come out of this problem. The issues we're dealing with today have been with us since when we started to talk about the header farmer crisis, and
But
we
Femi, pardon me, we all know that this has been on even since President Jonathan. And all the governments that have come to tell us that they are coming to fix this issue. Yet when they come in, they are giving us the same, we know it didn't start with us, and they will say it for 8 years and it goes. President Tinubu too, they are also saying the same thing. So for me, it's broken record, because that is actually why you are seeking power to get all those things sorted.
Unfortunately, the politician is the most optimistic person you are going to meet in the world. And most time that optimism is not based on any logical premise. Look, I said this during the campaigns last year, that whoever inherited the government from Buhari was in trouble. It was a poison chalice, because the economic mismanagement that we had over 8 years, where the economy was being driven by the monetary policy side of the economy, and the fiscal guys simply were just acting like there was no control. Somebody had to inherit that. And unfortunately, luckily for them, the current government has inherited that conundrum. However, what concerns me more are what are the long or medium-term policies that you are putting in place now that ensures that in another 4 years or in another 8 years, we're not having the same excuses. And I think that's where we should be bringing the conversation back at the end of the day to say that, look, okay, we know that these problems are here. Imported inflation is a problem. We have refineries that haven't worked in 20 years and have deprived us of investment, has drained us of forex. What are you doing to fix the problem? And what are the timelines you're having there? We have agriculture that's been struggling, where the central bank has put billions of naira into anchor borrower programs that have failed spectacularly. What are the long-term solutions to that? How do you ensure that you continue to support the agri sector, fix the security challenges that are in agri, and ultimately grow that? Now, Nancy, I want to say something that you would probably understand better. Look, when we started to have problems in the Niger Delta on oil production, remember that a lot of time analysts kept saying, you need to fix this problem, you need to fix this problem. President Obasanjo came, papered over the tracks, did amnesty and all of that. The implication of those years of not taking long-term decisions are what we're dealing with today. Nigeria's oil production is 1.2 million barrels. And, by the time you take out the portion of that belongs to the IOCs and the JV partners, you're down to probably 400,000 barrels of production. And again, we're saying take long-term solutions, take long-term processes to what's looking at where should we be in the next 5 years. No one is talking about that. We're talking about next December. We're talking about December inflation numbers. Look, December is done. From an economic point of view, the difference between now and December is it doesn't make any difference. What I want to hear from government is, look, these are the decisions we're taking today that in 5 years' time puts the Nigerian economy on a pedestal where it grows consistently, inflation is tamed, and all of that. When we start to think about that and not think about the next election cycle, then we can start to fix those problems. So let me just bring all of this home so that we're at least we're landing on somewhere. There are immediate issues that the central bank is dealing with, and that is the exchange rate and interest rates. Those are issues that have to be resolved And unfortunately, the limits that the central bank have are almost breached. So there is a problem there. If we continue to see high inflation into December, then we have to all raise our hands up and say there is a problem that we cannot solve. Because if you drive interest rates to 30%, businesses are going to start collapsing. So you are going to sacrifice growth on the long term. Second issue is the exchange rate. We know that the biggest problem we've had has not been whether the Naira is efficiently priced or not. No, that's not the problem. The big problem is that we don't have inflows of FX. You know, the traditional export markets that we have been destroyed. So we do not have a sustainable inflow of FX. We need to start talking about long-term solutions to FX in the short term. And once we do that, you would then realize that over time, food inflation will come down. We have significant FX reserves to be able to ensure that the Naira is fairly priced. Yes, the arbitrage in the Naira has more or less disappeared, just because if you look at the trading the trading margins, they are significantly lower than 3-4%. And when you have those sort of margins, you would say that the currency is properly priced. But bottom line still is inflation is very sticky. The exchange rate is significantly higher than it was last year. And we are not sure yet whether we've actually reached the bottom.
Okay, Femi, we just have less than 4 minutes, and let's see how much we can pile into the 4 minutes. I want us to take a look at the shrinking consumer demand, which I'm not seeing that argument come up now. And let me situate it around what I mean. Let me explain what I mean. If you go to a lot of places, even in fact, if you enter the market now, many people will say, oh, they know they sell again like before. Because people now cannot afford. Purchasing power has been eroded. You go even to eateries, for example, you know, popular eateries, or you will just see one person or two people there. You'll be there for like 2-3 hours, no one has come in. So this shrinking consumer demand. Then number two, around the question around stagflation, because what we are actually also dealing with is stagflation, low growth, high unemployment, high inflation, high interest rate and all of that. So things are not really looking good for us now. You've recommended a lot of stuff while you were talking. If the CBN has limited capacity to address this, where do we now look for hope, or now renewed hope? Hope is not a currency. Hope will not buy stuff for us yes.
So Nancy, two things that you've talked about that are very important. One is consumer demand. Now, understand that the Nigerian economy, when we look at our GDP numbers, historically, one of the biggest components of our GDP has been government spending and consumer demand. So those are the two biggest components that we've had. We can see clearly that the erosion of the wealth of the average Nigerian has meant that significant deceleration in demand has occurred. And it's clear. Look, think about it. This time last year, my salary is currently 50% what it was last year, just from a dollar parity basis. Then by the time you price in inflation, it's worth 20% of what it was last year. That in itself already tells you that capacity to spend is significantly constrained if my income has not grown, right? And that is what you're finding on the average Nigerian. So Nigerians are having to choose between healthcare and feeding themselves. And when choices get to that level, you know that people are only going to focus on what they can eat. And of course, who pays for that? It's growth at the end of the day. And eventually, so imagine what a business owner is dealing with. You're dealing with a high interest rate environment, which means your cost of capital is now in the 30s, 40s, right? Because if cost of debt is already 35, then cost of equity is probably close to 50.
Will be
so
higher.
Your weighted average cost of capital is like 40-45%.
Okay.
I mean, what business can you potentially do that gives you a 45% return? That's difficult.
Okay.
Second issue.
Okay. I just want to add this in because we have less than a minute. A question from Doze is asking that if they want to show up foreign exchange buffer by supplying foreign exchange to dampen inflation and back up exchange rate, why is the government, as we hear, planning to go full speed on importation of food to dampen skyrocketing local food prices? Are those policies not counterproductive to one another? So if you can add
I've
that.
answered that question. I tried to answer that
Yes,
question earlier on.
earlier.
The
Yeah.
reality is that if people are hungry, economics flies through the roof. You throw
Okay.
out economics and you feed them. That's the answer to that easily. You feed people and then you can worry about economics later. However, what we're saying now is that actually, so what I wanted to say, Nancy, and as my final point, is that the central bank is limited in what it can do. The solution to our growth right now is a fiscal problem. And the fiscal policy drivers or the fiscal bodies are the ones who need to step in and deliver growth and find ways to taper inflation.
Oh.
But honestly, the central bank can't do anything anymore. Their options are significantly limited.
Okay, I think we should leave it at that too. So it seems like what the central bank is doing now is just ritual, just normal ritual. Every two months, 6 times in a year, just give us the decisions and let's talk about it like this, while the fiscal side, comes up with whatever they're doing. Anyway, Femi, I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for coming on the program today. All right, I've been speaking with Femi Oladehin, who is the senior partner at Argentile Capital Management, and we've been looking at the July MPC's decisions. Thank you all for joining us again today. Be the best you can be, and be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. Thank you for watching. In case this is your first time watching us, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, drop your comments as well as like, and most of all, share our content.